So this is me uncovering this £94.50 standing charge per year liability. It's been in my property since before I moved in here. I think it's about 17 years old. And if I were to keep it for the next 10 years, that would cost nearly £1,000 without taking inflation into account. So in this video, we are going to be talking about money, and in particular, how much it has cost to install my heat pump in my house. We're going to go over the quotes, and we're going to go over the details of the Home Energy Scotland heat pump grant of £9,000 and how I found the process of recovering that grant. Now, if you haven't watched my previous videos, my name is Anthony. I own a 9 kilowatt solar panel array, and now it's completely electric, the running of my house. And that is absolutely fantastic. So this is literally one of the concluding activities, quite a major concluding activity to this overall project. So we'll go into my studio and we'll take a look at the numbers in more detail. So the main part of the quote was £17,400 and 28 pence. Now it's worth bearing in mind that that doesn't include everything. Before we got to that quote, let's take a look at the overall iterative process by which we arrived at that amount. So my inquiry started in the middle of July last year, and I approached 3 companies, one of which was Clanco, who I eventually went with. The other one was Advanced Refrigeration Limited. And then a third one was Aberdeenshire Source Heating Limited. I got 2 budgetary quotations out of that, one from Clanco, one from Aberdeenshire Source Limited. So it took quite some time just to get the budgetary quotation. We're talking maybe 4 weeks. And the thing I want to just simply say is that these people, there aren't too many of them. You can see here on the MCS website, you've got 10 installers worth within your search radius. So compared to the number of gas safe registered engineers, not many at all. I spoke with Clanco as an example. They have over 200 inquiries every single month, and they need to filter down those inquiries because they simply can't respond to 200 purchase orders every single month. So everyone starts off with a budgetary quotation. This is an indication of how much things will cost in the most basic terms without them even visiting your house. And then from there, you can decide whether to proceed or not. So I had one budgetary quote from Aberdeenshire Source Heating, £12,246. And I had one from Clanco, £11,715. All told, one thing we will say is that there are particular exclusions. There is no electrical supply included with these quotes. Any additional building or joinery work is not included. Also, if we have a look at the full scope of works in this budgetary quote, you'll see that there is no plumbing included in this. So it's literally just in the mounting and provision of the heat pump and the associated connections between the 2 units. Well, of course, price is not everything. Reputation matters a great deal to me as well. And the thing which swung it in favour of Clanco was the fact that they work with a plumber. So Derek Scott Plumbing and Heating is a plumber I have used for the last 12 years. Derek Scott himself installed my boiler for this house 12 years ago. And I know their pipe work and their professionalism is excellent. And that heritage has continued on 12 years later. So I decided to go with Clanco, and I invited them round for a survey, and they came back with a more detailed quote. So that more detailed quote now included some plumbing, so new radiators to be supplied and installed, only 5 of them, and the quote included the high temperature unit. This was the EPRA. This is a monoblock unit. I described that in my very first video. It included a hydro box, but it is not a split refrigerant system. The overall scope of works came to £18,147. So, of course, when you have to commit to such a large quantity of money, you want to be absolutely certain that the proposal given is correct. I asked Clancool to come up with some alternative quotes, one of which was for air-to-air source heating. So what we can see here is a proposal for a multi-split system. You can get 5 times split systems. So if you've got 10 rooms, you probably have 10 emitters inside your house, fan coil unit. As you can see, it's cheaper, so £14,226. They also came up with a ducted quote. It was a bit more expensive, so £15,800 for a ducted system. So it's worth bearing in mind that with air-to-air source heating, you do not qualify for the grant at all. So if you are going to be committing to those 2 quotes, then you will not get any rebate in terms of £9,000 from the Scottish Government. So I took the quote and we developed that further, the original air-to-water heat pump, and Derek's got plumbing and heating, came back to my house, and we had a big old discussion about radiator sizing. And the result is the final quote, which we have here. So here's the headline price for the final quote, which I accepted, £17,400.28. So again, it includes plumbing, and that was for 7 radiators to be supplied and installed. And it also included the heat pump, and it was a different heat pump to the original quote. This was a low temperature unit, and it is a split refrigerant system. One thing to note is that there is no immersion heater in the cylinder. So in that regards, if I accepted this quote, and I did, the hot water controller with Solar Edge will not be compatible with this solution. So the Solar Edge system will disappear. So the quote I got for electrical works from Barry Chapman, person who did my solar installation, that was £670. And I also got a local builder to build the concrete plinth for the compressor outdoor unit, and that cost £300. Now there is a good reason why you want to put this on its own plinth. The quote includes the specifications, the dimensions for the plinth and the separation from the wall, and as you can see, it is perfectly level. Now, if you mounted it on paving slabs, you cannot guarantee that this compressor unit is going to be level. The consequence of having uneven compressor units is that you get distributed loads on the bearings for your fan motor. And over time, those bearings will start to accelerate wear, particularly in the axial rather than the radial direction. And there are YouTube videos of what happens to compressors after a short number of years. They become extraordinarily loud, antisocially loud indeed. So you want to make sure this unit is level. So all told, from initial inquiry until the final revision of the quote, we were talking about 4 months. That sounds like a long time to get a quote, but it is a large capital commitment, and you also need to consider that there is also time that needs to be spent dealing with the paperwork for the grant from the Scottish Government. So when it comes to the grant from the Scottish Government, in my first video I was talking about the Renewable Energy Selector Report. This is a report you need to submit with the initial application for the grant, and you can create a selector report yourself. And I submitted the selector report which I had made, and I did not get the initial grant accepted. They said that this was not made by an advisor. I wanted to use this one because it was using language which was much closer to recommending an air source heat pump. This was the language they used. Technologies that are most suitable for your property. We think that following technologies are suitable for your property. So that there is an affirmative statement of a recommendation for an air source heat pump. The one that I got from the advisor was this one here, and it doesn't actually recommend it. It just simply says preparing your home for renewables, and we have identified 3 improvements that could be installed to potentially save you £167. And it recommends replacement light bulbs, which is fairly boring, draft-proof external doors, boring, A-rated glazing, UPVC, again, not a heat pump. But it then has a section on the heat pump and the potential fuel bill saving, but there's nothing here which affirmatively recommends the heat pump. So I was hesitant to use this. But since they rejected the one that I submitted previously, I then went ahead with low expectations, I'm going to have to admit, and I uploaded this into the application. And sure enough, 6 weeks later, I got an offer. So here is the offer. Grant value is calculated as being £9,000. So they included the agreement, and then a claim form, and then a claim form requirement document. So at this point, I needed to sign and return the agreement. So on page 6 of the agreement, we've got the signatures. So you might be thinking that page 1 to 5 and 6 out of 27 constitutes the entirety of the agreement. This is what I returned, page 1 to 6. It does not. And 6 weeks later, I got a rejection saying that I had not included all of the pages. From page 12 onwards, we get general terms and conditions. This all looks like an appendix to the agreement, and I thought to myself, this didn't matter, but they wanted me to upload all of this as well. So I thought to myself, right, I'll just put my initials on the bottom of each page of the agreement, and I'll just simply stitch it to the PDF document which I had previously uploaded. And I immediately followed that email up with a phone call, and I asked them the question, have you now got all of the documentation which is needed to acknowledge my acceptance of the agreement? And they told me on the telephone right there and then that they had accepted it. They are satisfied with the documentation that I have supplied, and they sent a confirmation email which acknowledged that they have now got all the documentation. So my advice to you is make sure you initial and send each and every one of these 27 pages back to Home Energy Scotland when you accept the grant agreement. Now, as well as returning the grant agreement, there are other things you need to return with that agreement. You need to also return proof of identification and proof of address, and a driving license which has both of those things in one document is not sufficient. You need to have 2 separate pieces of documentation. So I sent my passport and my driving license as proof of who I am and where I live, and that was accepted by Home Energy Scotland. So the only thing left to do was to schedule an appointment for getting the heat pump to be installed. So again, there are months which go between accepting things and getting things done. Does that really matter in the grand scheme of things? Well, for me, no, not really, other than satisfying my inner geek. I did have a propane tank which had fuel which I had already paid for. The last time I filled it up was in January 2023, long before I started thinking about heat pumps. So I have forfeited £640 worth of propane that is unused. That is another crucial feature to consider when it comes to installing a heat pump. Have you got unused fuel which you haven't burned yet? So timing matters, but it wasn't so critical for me. The more important factor was getting the job completed within the 9 months from the point where the offer was made. So now that we've got everything installed, we got the invoice received about 5 days after the system was energized and commissioned for the first time. So one thing I will say is that it is up to you, the homeowner, to pay the invoice. It is not up to the Scottish Government. The grant which the Scottish Government pays goes to you. It does not go to your installer. So make sure you get that invoice paid and then go and claim the grant. But after you've paid the invoice, there's 2 more things you have to do before you qualify for the grant. So one of the last things of any significance that we have to do in order to get the grant is that we need to commission an energy performance certificate survey on my property. So I went to the first EPC surveyor. They told me the cost was £90. They were an electrician living nearby, but they were on holiday. So I went into the next EPC surveyor, which had a reasonable price. It was £150, but they were able to do it in a couple of days. This was a company called Shepherd Surveyors. They are chartered surveyors all over Scotland. So they came along and they did my property survey. One thing I will say is really important is that you make sure you've got access hatches open to the floors and the loft. And you also, in my opinion, if you've upgraded the insulation in the walls, you should pop open one of your socket outlets or any other opening on the wall so that they can see that the insulation is indeed there. They like to use their eyes or they like to see official certificates. In the absence of official certificates, make sure they can see it. So the result of that energy performance certificate is really good. I got an A. So this property here got a standard assessment procedure score of 110, which is an A rating. Anything above 90 is an A rating on the standard assessment procedure scale. So this property here is extremely rare. You won't find too many A-rated properties for sale on the local property market, for example. You may be asking the question, well, why do I need to go through this process? Well, a lot of it is probably down to the fact that the Scottish Government want to improve the statistics on energy performance certificates for houses, and one of the only reasons at the moment you have for getting an energy performance certificate is when you're selling houses. It is a legal requirement to have a certificate when you sell a house or when you want to advertise it for renting. So yes, you get an energy performance certificate. It improves the Scottish Government's statistics. But the other thing is that energy performance certificates are a matter of public record. So anyone who knows my address can look up my house and they can see the energy performance certificate. I'm going to have to say I am really proud to get an A rating for my property. The last thing you have to do is leave a review on a particular website which the Home Energy Scotland will send you a link for. So it took about 4 weeks for me to get my Home Energy Scotland £9,000 grant. From the point of invoice to the point of receiving the grant money, it was about 3 weeks. And from the point of submitting my final grant application to getting the money, it was about 2 weeks. After making the application, I got an email from Home Energy Scotland asking me to call them. I called them. They called me back. They asked me to write an email saying that I am who I am and that I have performed the duties in the grant application, which I found a bit confusing. But anyway, about 10 days after that last email was sent, I got the money. So all told, without the grant, it cost about £18,700. And you've got to bear in mind that once the grant is taken into account, and also the fact that I got £200 for the hot water controller, the Solar Edge hot water controller, I got £200 for that as a second-hand sale. So we're talking about £9,750. Now, just to put that in context, my boiler upgrade with a new unvented hot water cylinder 12 years ago, that cost about £4,100. So we are about double the cost of those. And you need to bear in mind also we have got some new radiators, and in my opinion, so long as the inhibitor is correctly dosed inside the central heating system, those radiators should hopefully last longer than I will. So the question is it worth it? Well, that is going to be the subject of ongoing analysis and videos. But as far as I'm concerned, as an initial appraisal, I think very much it is worth it. Without the grant, I wouldn't have made this commitment. So then the next question is going to be, well, is it worth it for the Scottish Government, considering they're paying the grant? What is the Scottish Government getting out of it that they wouldn't have otherwise had? Well, in my observations, what the Scottish Government are going to get are more businesses which pay tax in the long term to the Scottish Government. This is not designed to support homeowners. It is really designed to support demand for new businesses to invest in zero carbon technologies. And as an example, my Clan Cool is one example. They're overwhelmed with inquiries, and that should be sufficient. That should be a strong signal to other people who are involved with the heating industry that heat pumps are the way to go. Where there is demand, after all, there should be supply. And as supply chains build up, then you will get greater efficiencies in terms of the cost of installation, and also you'll have better quality products and cheaper products coming out of the manufacturing industry. So all told, that is what the Scottish Government is getting. It's getting future taxation revenue from these industries. So in the next video, we are going to be taking a look at analysis of the performance of the heat pump in a bit more detail. I've created a web page where I took the outputs and fruits of my previous analysis video and tried to turn it into something that was much easier to digest. So we'll look at that. There's also going to be another solar panel video. We're going to be looking at the performance for the first 3 months of 2024. So that is all coming up. So in the meantime, I'd like to thank you all for watching, and I'll talk to you again very soon.